This is the class for persons as we left it. I better update the date because that's today. So this is as we left it. Got all the data members. We added two methods, which is whole name by surname, and I'm going to change that to whole name by forename because it looks neater. And then what I want to do is add two more methods that I think will be useful to us later on. Now I've got these on clipboard, so I'll just talk them through. I want to have a string of data, which is all of the data that we have for all of the fields in the person. And I want to join them together and return them as a string, which will have all of these forename, surname, address, town, postcode and telephone in one string with commas in between. So I also put another sort of method in here, which is the short data. And I think that when we get to the list box where we have to show those data members that we've got in there already, we can't afford to put this whole big wide string in there, or the form would be very wide in order to just accommodate all of this data. So I've got short data, and I think the short data should be their whole name by surname plus the postcode. Could be the telephone, could be the town, could be anything, but I've just chosen the postcode. So I think that's a good method that we will make use of later on. So now we want to start on the class that uses the person data and allows us to move it in and out of the storage that we've got in the text file. So I'm opening this up, and there's absolutely nothing about it at all at the moment. We originally created that, so I'm doing an update on it today. So there's absolutely nothing to do. And what we're going to do is we're going to use our import data, which has a method called getTextFileData, which uses a string, which is the file path, where it's where you'll find the text file that holds the person data. And we will now update PersonDB with a couple of methods. Now I think we may have to change this a bit later on because I've got a couple of ideas that I think might make the application more efficient, but for the moment we're going to create some new methods inside this DB class. Now I usually use DB as a suffix on the class name to indicate that this is for moving data about, for either providing import or export or write facilities or whatever it might be. I've got this as a person being managed in some way with the data that we've got. So I'm going to add the first method that we need. This is a kind of a factory class that's going to be used when we're working with any person data at all. So we would use this to hold the methods that we need when we are working with persons in our various screens in our interface. So the first method is going to be public, of course. It's going to be static, and it's going to return a data table. I'm going to call it get all person get all person data, and that's the signature for it. It's moaning because the red line indicates it's moaning because it doesn't know what it's going to return yet. So I'm going to paste code in and then talk it through rather than watching me type it. So here's the first instruction. Now it says here I could go straight to the return method and make it clear, but I want to do it step by step to help you to understand what's happening. So I've got a variable called DT, which is a data table type, and I'm going to use that as my return object. So the next instruction tells it how to populate the data table, which is going to be from import data, get text file data, and the path is there. Now the next instruction is just returning the method. So we've now got a data table, so that's what we should return. And that's it. So we've now got a method that supplies a data table with all of the data it finds in that file, so we can manipulate it when we need to work with it in different places. So let's just do our commenting. 1, 2, 3. Returns all pet data, and it's going to return it as a data table. So that's our first method. So what I want to do now is go back to where we created the text file. Now I've got mine in my D drive in the root called persons.txt, and I want you to add some headers for each of the columns of data that this text file will hold. Now these are structured like this because a data table, when it uses this data, will ignore this first row, saying that this is a header row. The data is actually going to come after it. So it's important that we have this structure. So it's forename, surname, address, town, postcode and telephone, and they are separated by a comma, and there's no spaces after the comma, and that's the way in which we construct the headers. Now I want us to remember that forename is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so we want 0, 1 and 4 for our short data. Remember I said forename, surname and short, and the postcode for the short data. So our next method is going to return that core data that we'll use as a short information set to identify the persons that we've got and we want to work with. So once it's going to be public, you understand that now, static. But this time we're not going to return a data table, we're going to return a list of something. So you do list and then chevrons like that. And what we're going to have in our list, we're going to have strings. And go on the other side of it, get all person short data. And we've now got the header for that. So I'm going to paste this in once again line by line. The first two sets of instructions are exactly the same as in the method above because we need the whole data table to work with, although I could get that there and pass it in here, but I want to make this step by step so that you understand what's happening. So now I want a temporary data list to hold things while we work with them. So I've got a working variable called list of strings. Temp list is a new list of strings, so that creates an instance of a list of strings called temp list. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a loop through in the data table that we've got here called DT and pull the information out of it. So here's how we loop through. For each what? Data row, and we'll call the row while we're working with it. In dt dot rows. So that means for each one of these we want to do stuff inside these curly braces, inside these brackets or braces. So what we're going to do is we're going to do every row that we find, we're going to create a person and assign the data from the rows that we find into the data members of our person that we need, which are the forename, the surname and the postcode. So let me just put that in as one piece of code. And there it is. So we want a var, a variable current person, which is a new person. And we're going to assign the forename, the surname and the postcode from, as you remember, 0, 1 and 4 in the text file. So we've got in each row, every time we get to a row, we make a new person. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use one of the functions of the person, which is person short data, which takes the reversed surname and whole name, surname and forename, and adds the postcode. Have a look at this once I've done it and it'll become much clearer. So we're going to get this method, and that will give us something to add into the list. So I've got temp list add, that's the list of strings that we're working with, add the current person and use the method person short data that it has built in, and that will add surname, comma, forename, and then I think it's a colon and then the postcode. So now that we've got through each looped row, we've found a person in each row, we've extracted the information we want, and then we've added this to our temp list. And at this point, on this side of this bracket here, or this brace, everything's gone through. It's looped everything it needs, so we can now return our temp list. And that's what we wanted. So we've got a list of just the shortened data that we want when we're working with individuals. So the last thing to do here is just to add our usual commentary, which gives us high quality code. So it gets short person data and returns a list of strings. So in the next sort of, as we move forward, when we get to the point where we are going to store data from our form, we'll put a new method in here which writes data, and I think it makes sense for it to go in here in PersonDB because it's putting. We've just been doing pulling, if you wish, for all of this. We're getting data out of the database, and we'll put the push method, the create of our CRUD, where these are the read, we'll put the create method in here as well. But that's when we get to the GUI situation, we start to work with the logic behind what's happening in that form.